Rob, I'm excited. We have our first international guest on the Reinvent the Classroom.
And our favourite Swede.
Our favourite Swede, Dr. Eva Hartel. You're a fan of her work?
I have been for many years, actually. STEM,
assessment, and all things Australia. She's a massive lover of Australia. And importantly, sometimes we are pretty hard on ourselves in Australia. We've got that tall poppy thing. We're pretty critical. And it's interesting to see another perspective to say, hey, you know what? You're doing pretty good.
Great.
Let's get into it. All right, we're on the Reinvent the Classroom podcast. We're going to talk to Eva Hartel today. We're going to discuss assessment. We're going to discuss STEM. And we're going to get maybe a little bit of a view from a Swedish perspective about Australian education. Rob, as always, you're by my side. But today we have the fantastic Dr. Eva Hartel right here in our studio in Sydney, Australia. Welcome, Eva.
Thank you, Brett. I'm so happy to be here and finally get to meet you in person.
Yes. Eva and I have been connected online for a long time now, lots of years.
10 years maybe?
Yeah, about a decade. You've been here in Australia a number of times?
Yeah. Been here about 6 times.
About 6 times?
Yeah.
For holidays or for work?
Work.
Always
you need
work.
to have it. That's my excuse, but I like to come here for pleasure as well.
That's it.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we unpack your work? What is it? I know you've been speaking up on the Gold Coast. You're at the National Education Summit in a few days down in Melbourne. What is it that you talk about? What is your research all about?
Well, my research is about my passion, which is education, and connecting teachers within the classroom and to sort of bridge teaching and learning with the kids in the classroom. That's my passion, and that's what I do for work, and that's what I'm here to talk about. So
that's it. With a particular angle at STEM and assessment. Am I correct? That's something that you've done a fair bit of research in over the years.
Yeah, that's I have a background as a STEM teacher in Sweden. I've taught 10 to 16-year-olds, and during my doctoral studies, I also taught at a teacher training program at KTH, the Royal Institute of Technology. But I always had a passion to learn more on how my students can learn more. So I tried all kinds of things, and then I enrolled in a researcher teacher research program that was launched by the Swedish government. And at first I thought that was not for me, because I want to be with the kids in the classroom and interact with them. But then some people encouraged me to pursue that, and so I did, which I'm very pleased, because that's why I found the literature that I was looking for. And the literature is the work mostly of Black and William on regards to formative assessment. And since I am a STEM teacher, it's sort of natural to stay within that field, because that's where my passion is, and that's where I feel like my self-efficacy is strongest, you could say.
Look, and I know, thank you. From years ago, you connected me with Dylan William himself, and we were able to do some fantastic fundraising and different things with Aussie Ed, with some of the schools that were having a little bit of a challenge during all the bushfires a few years ago. Oh, yeah. But I do want to unpack your take on STEM and some of your research and assessment, and I really want to find out about what you're going to be talking about at the National Education Summit. But before we do that, I know you're a massive lover of all things Australian. We were just talking off air a moment ago about your love of Bundaberg ginger beer.
Oh yeah.
But from a Swedish perspective, from an international perspective, how is the Australian education system viewed? Like, what is our the international version of how people think Australian education performs?
Oh. Well, I can't speak for the whole world.
Well, no, sorry. You are literally speaking for the entire world. Everything you say will be held accountable.
Oh yeah, of course. Well, for my personal view, Australian education system had a lot of things that we really want to unpack and learn more about, especially how you work with your curriculum stuff, and that you have this passion. I've just been following Aussie Ed, as you know, and those passionate teachers who really want to do more, and how they connect with each other. But I'm aware that maybe that was just one part of the Australian system. And we've also been, since I'm in educational assessment, I've also been very intrigued by the work with that they have been doing up in Queensland, the Queensland moderation system, where they have teachers together. I think they've sort of abandoned that. They've had that for a long, long time, but they're moving towards, well, in another direction. But I think regardless of the national assessment system, you need systems where teachers can work together. And I think the Australian version, like this moderation system with panels and stuff where teachers actually collaborate, that's what I see as a passion. And I think there are like also perhaps about some myth also that sort of, you know, the Australian way to teach math or the Australian way to teach literacy or something. But I now am aware that I guess there are not just one big thing about the Australian education system. But I recently learned on this, since you have sort of, well, I'm not the person who should explain those. No,
but we have a state-based, so every state curriculum, even though we have a national curriculum, each state then has their own syllabus. So you're right, that there isn't, I guess, a unified Australian methodology or an Australian
even
way.
Even then, our universities teach quite differently across the country, I believe. So our teachers are educated differently on how to go about it.
In the Swedish system, how does it work in Sweden? Like, is there a national curriculum, a unified approach? Yeah,
well, not a unified. We have a national curriculum and a national school educational act and such. And we start school when you're about 6 years old, and you finish when you're 16. But you don't finish. You have to go until you're 16, and then you continue for upper secondary school and then tertiary or whatever. But we have a national curriculum. It's a criteria based, and it's the one teacher who awards all the grades. We have some national assessments, but they're only for like moderation, and it's a teacher who assesses the national tests, and the kids sit the test in year 3, 6, and year 9, and not in all subjects. Only Swedish, English, and math is all the way through.
Like bilingual assessment right from the outset, so Swedish and English straight from the outset.
Yeah,
wow.
They start in year 6. They have the first national test in English.
Okay,
but it's a one teacher who is the sort of he or she can decide on how she will enact the curriculum, if he wants to use textbooks or iPads or whatever resources she wants to, if she has access to those resources, of course. But it's not, our curriculum is not as strict, like you have to do this. But there's sort of there's some areas of content areas that needs to be touched upon within a 3-year span. So in each subject,
3-year span. Wow. Okay.
Well, we have 16 or 17 mandatory subjects. We have a very comprehensive school. So you're taught science, technology, and mathematics all the way through year 1 to year 9. And there is a 3-year span in terms of content, and it's sort of a progression in that content between year 1, 2, 3, and then 4, 5, 6, and up till year 9. But if you, Rob, are very interested in biology and a particular like evolution, that's your passion, I guess you will teach more about that than, for instance, on how the heart works or something.
Okay.
But you have to teach the kids on how the body system works, of course. But maybe you will spend more time on what your passion is.
A bit more choice there for teachers about the content, do you think, than we have here?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
But on the other hand, for being a student, you're very exposed to your one teacher. So we had to find ways to teachers to collaborate, to also find ways to teach in sort of different ways so that the kids will learn as much as possible, which is why my passion, that's why I really liked formative assessment, because that's the way it does it. It's very general formative assessment. There's some techniques that you can do regardless of whatever subject you have. But if you're confident, if you're self-efficient, if you have a strong self-efficacy, then you are more likely to use your whole passion for that, I guess.
Yeah. Is that what you're here to speak about? Are you talking about formative assessment? Like, is that what you're in town to discuss?
Yeah, well, sort of. I'm here.
Yeah, unpack that for me. I want to hear similar topics to what you presented in the Gold Coast as what you're presenting in the summit at Melbourne, or different?
The Melbourne summit is in June next year. Yeah. Yes, in the same area, and that's where my research is. Since I'm doing research in trying to find ways to connect people using digital technologies to support formative assessment. That's my one of my research is very narrow. Yeah. So I use a methodology called comparative judgment. Right. It's a methodology that sort of have you heard about comparative judgment?
No, unpack it.
I've actually been part of one recently around AI.
Oh wow!
But
cool.
Yes, I do want to hear about it. No. I want to hear about it from the mouth of the expert.
Well, let's take turns. Can you, for everyone listening in and watching, can you unpack what comparative judgment is, comparative assessment is, and then can you give us a little bit of a taste of your experience, your recent experience?
Please do.
Perfect. Double turn.
I'm more interested to hear from me.
Oh, you got to go first. You're the guest. He's on this show all the time.
Sorry. Well, comparative judgment is something that we have innate in our body because we compare. For instance, yesterday we were up in the Blue Mountains and it was sort of cold.
It's beautiful too.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, very, very beautiful. And a bit cold. Actually, I had to wear a bit
it's up in the mountains.
a hoodie. But it's not cold as where I'm from. I just talked to my daughter yesterday and it's minus 17 degrees back home.
That is sort of
minus 17 Celsius.
Wow.
So that's a bit colder, you could say.
Just a little bit.
So compared to that's cold. But it was still cold yesterday. Yeah. And I bring my own experience, and I compare these temperatures. So I compare. I use my own experience, my knowledge, and everything that I'm used to when I do compare. But in education, we use sort of lost the word, holistic judgment. You don't have to, if you have, for instance, a pair of worked examples, for instance, we can. No, sorry, I lost it.
That's all right. It's hard. It's hard. And we would be fair. We're asking you to unpack your research in a language that's not your first language. Why don't you?
Well, I used to. When I give talks, I just said I'm so I prepared so much, and I'll just give it to you. But so I wasn't.
Yeah. No. Well, that's it. That's the trouble.
But it's a methodology that works really well in terms of assessing open-ended questions. So in STEM education, most work is open-ended. That there could, if you inquiry or even whatever you're studying, you're doing a science experiment or something, it's open, and you can't just say to a kid, "Oh, so you were 98% correct on your lab work," or "You were 75." Sorry.
Yeah. What does that even mean?
What does it mean? Yeah. Or 4 out of 5, or it doesn't say much, but maybe you could say, "So, Rob, compared to your last hand in, this was much better," or something.
Yeah. And
also a way to unpack criteria for success, because I think you use like rubrics and stuff and have criteria.
Very popular.
And either you can ride a bike or you cannot, or can you ride a bike in a fairly good way, or can you do you compare. And what does these mean? These words in the rubric mean? Not much. It's like when you go to the wine, you buy a bottle of wine, and it has this text. It says the flavor is a bit of licorice, earth, and dust. What does it mean? But if you have a try this wine, you can have a feel and a sense of it. And if you compare it, if you have a particular dish, I don't know, a steak with that wine, and that will fit much better.
They pair well together.
Yeah.
And in comparative judgment, you have worked examples, you have student work, and they're paired 2 at a time. And you don't have to say, this is 87% better, or this is 90 something. You just say, well, this one is better. And then you're presented with another pair and say, well, this one is better. And that goes on in an iterative process. So you get the flavor of all kinds of work. And if you have a competitive ranking, it could be used for that. But in terms of education, we hardly use competitive ranking. So it's a better way to have these compare these two pairs, and choose one as better, and then you have to justify why is this one better. So you need to think hard, and you sort of, and if you have been involved as a student in this, because teachers can do this, but as a student you can do this. So if we have a sequence of, say, 4 weeks or something, and in the middle we're doing you can do all kinds of work, but say you have a cross-curricular STEM theme, and you are redecorating a park from Agenda 2030 perspective, for instance, and with a particular focus on materials and transport. And so you learn about the transport and materials, and then you do a design. You have a design brief, and you do a model and such. And traditionally, you just your own within, maybe you work in groups, and you just see, you have to come up with all the ideas yourself. But through comparative judgment, we could have a formative assessment, formative feedback intervention, where halfway through, not in the end, so while learning, we share these ideas through comparative judgment. So you hand in your work and I hand in mine, and we can all look at each other's in this pairwise iterative process. And I chose maybe Rob's as better than mine because so. And then I have to think, and my research, this is sort of preliminary, shows that it's the way when I have to provide feedback to you and decide one is better, I sort of self-reflect upon my own work.
That's the
sort of double-directed feedback.
You're improving your craft by actually being able to focus in on the individual things that make it good.
Yeah.
Well, because what's in a number? If you get a score, if you get a B or a C or an A, or you get a 75 or a 67 or a 92, what does that mean? But if I've had to say, well, Rob, your work is different to mine because of these, then I actually have an understanding of what the difference between mine and yours, and then because I've been part of that decision making, I know what I need to improve and what I need to do different in the next iteration. Next time I have the opportunity to write, next time I have the opportunity to present something, because I've seen what you're doing, now I can say, well, I need to move the needle here too.
We have such a focus, I think, and I don't think this is just an Australian thing. I think it's just a standardization education thing on summative assessment, and then we focus in on CTJ, which is consistent teacher judgment. We want to make sure that the students are being marked consistently. So all the teachers get together and do this. But it seems so much more powerful for the students to be the one actually going through this process, because then they understand the work far better.
Yeah.
And the whole formative part of it is they can improve that.
Yeah, well, that's the feedback loop, isn't it? Like it's actually letting them be a part of that feedback
loop. If it's summative, they've already moved on to the next topic and the next project. And I mean, they're not going to be able to get any, even if they get feedback, it doesn't feed back into any more learning.
Well, look, I want to unpack what were you doing with this AI, this comparative assessment with AI?
I think that was a bit of a misunderstanding on my part, though it is very similar. I was just one of the little hedgehogs in this experiment that I won't mention her name, but she's doing fantastic research around AI. But I won't mention her name because I don't know how much I can give away. But she was asking experts, so she came to me, which I thought was hilarious, but around AI in education. And what was great about it is that we had a conversation that was very similar to this. She asked many questions and then came back to me some weeks later after she'd spoken to a whole lot of other people in this area of interest. And she said, overall, I've pieced it together using research approaches, and these are the themes and the ideas that came through. Here are the ways that I thought you were different and similar to the other researchers. That enabled us to have another conversation and for me to think through again why those differences are there. Do I actually think that still, now that I've seen the other experts? And so we can come to some kind of conformity around what we actually believe, rather than it just being everybody having their ideas, and then we don't build on each other's, or we all get together and maybe the loudest person wins out, or maybe it's just groupthink, which we find some middle that doesn't really mean anything. And I think it's very similar in that it's those discussions and then comparing our ideas, but also comparing our work and coming to something better. So I love your research and where you're going with it, Eva.
It reminds me of a study that I did a couple of years ago for our National Agency for Education, where we had
so what was it? Sorry?
The Swedish National Agency for Education. It was just a pilot, but we had 10 teachers getting together, and they did it was a STEM task in terms of nutrition and food and biology and stuff. And the kids, they collected digital portfolios with sound and videos and such, and not just the written work. So it was more multimodal. And the 10 teachers, they did the study with the task with their students, sort of like 250 students, handed in their work, and did a comparative judgment on that. And just to explore what the teachers were focusing on, and what sort of what they saw compared to the national criteria. And it was a bit of at first people were like, what is this? But then they saw this because and I interviewed them, and also in other studies, they say that they get a flavor of what students can do.
There's that word
because
again.
You're so isolated as a teacher. Maybe you are here as well. So you are with your kids, you do what you think is best. I think that no one else than a teacher knows what's best, but you sort of do in your own sort of silo. But comparative judgment can open up and invite you to my classroom. And this is what happened in this trial, where the 10 teachers got together, did a task, did comparative judgment, and then we ended up with this rank order. And it's a consensus of the professional judgment. It doesn't necessarily correspond to the grades or anything. So, so not just the top ones are an A. It doesn't necessarily happen. Everyone could be an A. Anyway, bypass. What happened? So we got this rank order, and we gave all the 10 schools a color. So maybe you were yellow, you were blue, and you knew your color, but you did not know your color. And we colored all the students' examples, so we get a rank order in different colors. And when we showed them, because we didn't want a competition between the teachers, so we just wanted to see their reaction. So we showed them the rank order with all these colors. One of the teachers just spontaneously said, "Oh, I didn't know my students were that good." She was so surprised and relieved, of course, but she was like, "Oh my God, my students, they're really good." I think she thought they were good anyway, but that good. And to understand the whole story here is that you have to. This teacher was working in a really, really challenging area, a really social economic challenged school, and so I think maybe she had a bit of a bias towards what her students could do. And when she was entering this trial, she was a bit nervous at first, because she knew that there were school kids from really how do you say rich schools, high socioeconomic areas, and so maybe she thought, what can my students do? And then she thought that her students outperformed them. So it was like, wow.
Yeah.
And also, and this is the Swedish context, is that it is the one teacher. You have lots of power and sort of, but at the same time you're very exposed also as a teacher. You need to collaborate, and this was what I found, that the teachers really enjoy about comparative judgment, because it facilitates collaboration, you could say, and you can use it to unpack what happens. And we can invite each other to each other's classroom. But I think the most powerful thing is when you use it with students. It's a bit of a hassle to set it up, but if you manage to have, like they did they done it at University of Limerick and also at Purdue University in the States. University of Limerick is in Ireland, where they had students of different ages they've done formative assessment for peer feedback while learning. Because you were talking about the feedback loop. Feedback loop. Don't spend time on feedback unless you make sure that they can use the feedback. That must have time. Not in the end.
Yeah.
It's a waste of everyone's time, you could say.
And not 2 weeks later when you mark it.
Yeah. If you would have done this and that and then then you would have, well, it's better to do it while learning. So plan it. And it doesn't have to be, that's general for all feedback. It doesn't have to go through comparative judgment. But if you do like 2 stars and a wish peer feedback, fine. But do that while learning, not in the end. And if you said something like continuous teachers assessment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why do you should, is that while learning as well, or for formative purposes?
Often this is about summative. So consistent teacher judgment is really when we're focused on making sure that we're giving our students the correct marks.
Yeah.
And like you said, we'll have classes that are outperforming others and that we consistently mark them. But I think it's so much richer having our students test the flavors, as you say. I've never heard the term flavors used with assessment before, but I love it. Do you think we focus too much on summative assessment
in
as
general,
a society?
Yes. Yeah, I think so. I mean, we need, but we need to. Why are we doing? What's the purpose and why? And what's the purpose for who? And how do we know it's valid? How do we know it's reliable? And validity is, I mean, that's something about how you interpret and what you do with it. It's not just something of the particular activity. It's what happens next. What is valid, and valid for who? And is it cost efficient? And I mean, having teachers writing long essays on what the students should have done if, and then I don't think that's my personal view.
Well, this time of year in Australia, we always have the argument around the ATAR, which is our score essentially
University
for the year 12 HSC getting entrance into university.
Yeah.
And should it just be a point out of 100? Like, is that really relevant?
Well, there's controversy at the moment too about that, because a lot of universities have been taking the stance of early entry, which sounds fantastic on paper because there's huge wins there. Because if take away the high stakes assessment and allow a child to use their body of work to enter, and not only just their academic work but other escapades, or if they're athletes, portfolio work, all that sort of stuff. But at the same time, is it like a double-sided coin? Like, as much as that is good for the students and good for those early universities to secure, I guess, slots, it also creates a little bit of additional competition between the universities to get in and secure as many people with enrolments early, which devalues the score and the level that it takes to get into it, which really upsets the whole system at the moment. So I think we're in a bit of a flux where, do we hold on to the ATAR system where we need a score and we value that and that's all there, or do we go with this early entrance system? Because it seems like a hybrid. Neither system gets to be done well.
Have you fixed this problem yet in Sweden?
No.
How does a child enter university in Sweden?
There are 2 ways. There's when you go to upper secondary school, so when 16 till 18 something, you can either go vocational or to prepare for university. So if you prepare for you're about to change that so everyone can enter the university. Anyway, then you have courses, mathematics, Swedish, and you attend different programs, the science program or the engineering program or social science, whatever. And you have a certain number of courses, and those courses are of different length. So here comes the complicated. I am almost that I don't understand it myself, but it's the one teacher who decides upon the grade. That's the basics. Wow. So one teacher. So if you teach me, you award me my grade.
That seems possibly very unfair.
What happens if there's like a relationship clash between the student and teacher?
Yeah, that's the problem. That's why we try to, in theory, it should be in practice as well. Teachers collaborate and talk to each other. But in some smaller schools, you might be the only math teacher around, or social science teacher. So you award me the grades, and there are national criteria, but it's sort of open for interpretation. But from it's your professional judgment. So it's a bit built. You trust the teachers a lot. You built in. So it's a professional judgment of the evidence of learning that I, as a student, have produced, and you have designed those activities to elicit evidence.
Yeah.
So you are the designer of those activities, and that's why you have to make sure that these activities where you elicit evidence of learning, is it for formative purposes or for summative purposes? You need to make sure that, but it's a bit of a blur. Anyway, so if after 3 years you have finalized, fingers crossed, all the different subjects and all the different courses, and depending on the length of the course, the A, B, C, D is converted into mark. Is it 20, 15, or 10 points or something, and multiplied with the length of the course, and then you end up with a sum. And I think 20.0 is the highest, then you can add on different courses. If you have advanced mathematics or extra languages, you can reach a bit higher.
I've never heard of that, but it sounds like it's your teacher, judge, jury, and executioner. That's a lot of pressure on the teacher, but also
it's high stakes.
High stake and you
I thought ours was high stakes.
Yeah.
And you cannot, if the judge had ruled, you cannot.
There's no avenue for recourse if you disagree with what the teacher.
There is an avenue, but it's a bit of it. Yeah. That's one way. So you sort of have and then you apply to all the universities at once, and you don't just apply to that university or that university. You apply in one, and you're ranking.
Okay, I want to study education, so I go to all the universities simultaneously.
It's one. It's one application form, you could say, but it enters all the you decide you want to go to Stockholm or KTH or whatever university, and you put them in a particular rank order, and then depending on how many points you got, you will
which one you
succeed.
Get accepted into.
Yeah, and then
starting not to feel so bad.
The other way is you sit like a test that is run twice a year, I think. Högskoleprovet and university entrance test,
right, okay.
And it's an entrance for all the universities, and the highest score is 2.0, and it's mathematics, it's some English, I think, some Swedish, some vocabulary, so it's a broad
skill set.
Yeah, and there's been some that it has been researched very thoroughly, and it's very consistent, you can say.
Okay.
That actually is an interesting pathway.
So that's like a side way.
Like that.
High stakes again for the child, though.
Well, it is high stakes, but if it's broad,
but you can do it as many times as you like.
It's not content specific. It's broad.
Sounds similar to our selective school ones that happen in year 6. If your child goes for one of those.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's yes, but a different ethical debate about selective schools and higher education, tertiary education.
True.
But the methodology of the assessment, I understand what you're saying there. Look, I'm curious. We've been talking a lot about assessment now. We've gone down a little bit of a rabbit hole with university, but I know STEM is a big passion area for you. If looking back, your work in STEM has been for a number of years now. Broadly speaking, what have been the big victories? What have we done collectively well in STEM education? What changes have you seen?
I think since it has gained lots of attention, that's one gain. Just to see that you can...
Yeah, awareness.
Awareness, yes. Awareness of the important... Because the world is not divided into subjects. And also working internationally, I see that we don't have a STEM curricula. We have a science, biology, physics, technology. Yeah. But the world is not divided into different subjects. But acknowledging STEM, you can acknowledge how the world works, sort of say. but
more
also
real world, more realistic,
more realistic, authentic,
the real world experience.
And we solve problems. But to solve a problem, you need to know some content, because that's and when people work, when they're adults, they collaborate and they work together, and you come with your expertise and you come with your expertise, and we work together. But as a child, you're not the expert yet. You need to know content and such, and that's also one sort of victory, because a couple of years ago, at least from my understanding, there was a lot of the general capabilities. They were so general that it was nothing. It didn't mean anything.
Watered down the expertise.
Watered down, yes. It doesn't work that way. Now we can acknowledge that students must be taught. That is also, I think, an importance. You just don't pour knowledge on them and they stick. They need to practice. They need to be exposed to different learning activities. They need to have opportunities to practice, and learn, and then and think hard about stuff, so it sticks.
Well, this is the pedagogical importance of making sure we give students opportunities to practice what they've learned. Like, it's not just theoretical. You can't just hear something, like you say, you can't have it poured on there and you get it. It's not like osmosis. Where I just put it on. That they need to be able to get their hands dirty, get in, use it. If it's mathematics, algebra, if it's geography, like whatever it happens to be, have to understand concepts, play with those concepts, make mistakes, be guided, definitely. And say, well, that's wrong, and this is where we need to go, and this is how we can learn and refine and improve and get that stickiness of that knowledge.
Yeah, and nowadays this is also one of the groundbreakers, you could say, kids they've always learned a lot from outside of school, and they bring that stuff to school. So just because you haven't taught a kid, they know stuff already, but all the kids doesn't know all the stuff already. That's why we have education, so that they will learn more and also challenge their ideas. And here comes where the formative assessment comes in, so that you could elicit and take them from where they are and move them forward on their learning journey. And kids doesn't always learn what they're taught. Have you ever experienced that?
Yes.
Well, I thought I was the only one.
Learn what I'm taught.
I've told you so many times, Rob.
So many times.
How many times do I need to tell you?
Yeah. So that's where it comes this iterative. You have to learn and challenge. And since kids have access to not just the textbook and the teacher in school, they have access to the whole world. So they learn. My kids, they learn English, and they learn stuff even from Minecraft, for instance. They learn so many things from YouTube and such.
Well, that's part of this whole reinvent the classroom concept, isn't it? Like, we don't just need to do things the way that we've always done them. We now have all these new technologies. We have let's have a look at the different pedagogies. Let's have a look at the different ways of learning, so that we can improve student learning outcomes as a result of it. I've got one more question for you, final question. Yeah. I'm going to focus in on your inner expert. We were talking about that expert knowledge before. I'm going to see if there's a little Eva paleontologist hidden inside. If I was to ask you what your favourite dinosaur was. I don't think we get asked our favourite dinosaurs enough in the world. I've asked a few of our guests this question, haven't I, Rob? I'm curious to see. Do you have a favourite dinosaur?
And you asked me to pronounce that in English as well. I have a catch on. I have an answer for this. My favorite dinosaurs are the ones that are up in the Blue Mountains. I was in the Blue Mountains yesterday, and there was a dinosaur park.
I told you they were still there, man, and they're alive, right?
Yeah, they're alive.
The little raptors and everything.
Yeah, and I learned about the shapes of the carnivores or the herbivores and all kinds of stuff. Sometimes it's sort of ruined the experience of the beautiful mountains. You hear like a roar. There was this giant dinosaur coming up from the ground or something. But my favorite dinosaurs are the ones that live up in the Blue Mountains in the park.
Very good, very good. Well, you know what? That is all about experiential learning, And I guess we're talking about different pedagogies. Experiential learning is a very important pedagogy. And I know you were talking about STEM before, but getting out into nature, seeing like science, getting hands-on with the world, with our flora and fauna, and being able to even see tangibly these statues and the animatronics of the different dinosaurs coming out. You were going to say something before, but you weren't going to say it in English. You had a Swedish pronunciation for a dinosaur. What were you going to say?
I forgot that. Sorry.
There you go. We've got a little stegosaurus there on the table, and a T-Rex, and
maybe.
Of course, not quite a dinosaur, but we have the mammoth there as well, holding up just next to the mammoth lesson. Rob, any final questions for Eva?
Look, I just want to say welcome to our country for the 6th time. I'm looking forward to the 7th, I think, in June, isn't it?
Yeah. I'll be back.
And I've been following you for years on Twitter. It's fabulous to see you in person. And the things that you are covering, STEM, assessment, they're the most important, some of the most important that impact practical teaching. If teachers are aware of reading your research, they can take it and use it the next day in their classroom. And that's the best kind of research. So thank you.
Thank you.
There you go. If you're not following Eva Hartel or Dr. Eva Hartel, make sure you do so. Eva, thank you very much for coming on our podcast today, and I'm looking forward to continuing our friendship and our mutual learning from each other as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Wow, Eva Hartel.
Yes, she's fantastic.
So smart.
Yes.
So smart. Really interesting that comparative assessment process.
Yeah. And I think something that if we were doing it more, especially when we have our students actually comparing their work with each other in a way she suggested, enormous.
Well, that's it. Like, what's the value of a mark if it doesn't actually help you get better? If it's just if it's just saying what you were, not what you could be, that's the almost anti the whole education concept. Education is about how do we help you improve,
no matter
to
what
be your very best
level we're at, we can always improve.
So I love that sort of. We're talking here about all these ideas, thought leadership about reinventing the classroom, doing things differently, improving impact, getting better student learning outcomes. Something so simple, or actually not simple concept, difficult execution at scale, but do you know what? So purposeful
and practical. Like as a teacher, we can just take that and use that in our classroom tomorrow.
Teachers could do that tomorrow.
Yep. And her thoughts around STEM, I thought really strong. Just the fact that we can work through our silos and actually combine things together to do better work and focus on that, less about the summative assessment, more about that formative assessment, even in STEM. It's huge.
And how do you be so articulate in your second language? I don't understand. I can barely speak English properly. She's in her second language.
Well, you just saw me
PhD
falling
work.
over my words, and she didn't do that. So yeah, no, very, very, very impressive person.
Impressive lady, impressive researcher. Followed her work for a long time. Look, absolutely phenomenal. If you want to watch episodes of Eva or ones similar to Eva, go to hp.com.au/RTC. There's a whole treasure trove of experts to dive in, to listen to hear from. And of course, if you want to connect with your school and actually get a readiness assessment done where we can collect some data and have our AI give some recommendations on what you can do to improve digital learning and improve learning outcomes at your school, go to the same website, Reinvent the Classroom, hp.com.au/RTC.